Joey Drew Studios has released a new teaser for the mysterious new Bendy game. This teaser features Wally Franks as he talks about how the studio is changing, and what he reveals has utterly buried fanships, as well as brought some back to life. What can we possibly expect from the new Bendy game, and will your shipping dreams come true? Watch on to find out. Another Bendy game is coming? You betcha! Wally Franks opens his tape by saying,
"Another big day at Joey Drew Studios."
Which is really interesting for a couple of reasons. 1. What is this big day? Is it the opening of Bendyland, or did the animators work overtime? 2. Looking at the date this recording was made, March 5th, 1933, and cross-checking with a calendar, we can see that Wally made this recording on a Sunday. So this may be a day of overtime at the studio, or simply a busy day at Bendyland, as we know that Wally worked in both of these areas. These points will lend to our analysis later on in the video. Which brings us to the next thing that Wally mentions.
It's the same old dirty floors they always been. Just more feet messing them up now.
This isn't the only time that feet are mentioned in this teaser. The description also makes mention of more feet, which is really strange. What is with the emphasis on feet? My thoughts on this are maybe feet are top of mind for Wally because he swept the floors of the studio. This also makes sense because he talks about everyone messing up these same old dirty floors. Since this tape got released 2 in-game years after Joey Drew's first teaser tape, it may just be confirming that Joey Drew eventually did hire more people to work at the studio. Of course, having beaten the main game already, we know this. So why is it important? I believe that this line might hint towards a plot that we can expect in the next game. A plot that becomes more and more apparent in Wally's next few lines. Take this one for instance.
The only feet I don't mind tromping around here is Campbell's. She's good to me.
This establishes a positive relationship between Susie Campbell and Wally Franks, while also implying that no one else was nice to him. You could say that this suggests Wally was interested in Susie, but then he says,
I heard her talking with Sammy the other day. I'd know better. I'd say there was magic there.
Wally doesn't seem too pressed about what he witnessed between Susie and Sammy, and almost seemed a bit guilty for thinking it. This is confirmation that Sammy and Susie were advancing in some kind of relationship at work. We've actually theorized about this before, but it seems that the thing that brought them together, their job, eventually pried them apart. This gives one potential plotline that we could explore in the new Bendy game, one involving Susie Campbell's backstory, something that seemed rather fleshed out in the first game, but tragically cut short in Chapter 4. In the new game, this could just happen through audio tapes, but there is also a possibility that we can control Susie after she had been transformed. The Joey Drew Studios team has already assured us that we will not have a prequel, sequel, or even a Bendy and the Ink Machine 2, but also that Bendy will return. The only character other than Henry and Sammy that I can think of who revealed a tragic run-in with Bendy that we haven't experienced is Susie in the form of Alice Angel, since she seemed more aware of what Bendy and his lackeys were capable of. That is, unless we will learn about brand new character interactions in the new Bendy game. Wally's line describing Susie and Sammy's encounter as magic is also really clever. Besides suggesting a relationship, it may also mean that both Sammy and Susie were preparing for her to be transformed into Alice Angel. Magic was mentioned before in the world of Bendy by Thomas Connor when explaining how the 3D toons were brought to life.
What started as a machine to simply mold life-size figures now seems to be teetering on the edge of magic more than engineering.
For Susie, even though she didn't realize it at the time, this may have all been part of Joey Drew's plans to make more than her dreams as a voice actress come to life. One more interpretation of this line that came to mind was that of Sammy laying off Susie in this moment. However, it didn't seem that she was upset with Sammy based on Wally's perspective. He reveals to us that Susie and Sammy caught Wally looking at them, meaning that they are all aware of what the others are thinking, except for perhaps Wally's interest in Susie. Maybe a stretch, but Wally catching them being intimate may be part of the reason why Sammy quickly replaced Susie, unless he was forced to by Joey or became interested in Allison instead. In the Hot Topic Takeover, Sammy Lawrence reminisces fondly about Susie Campbell, so it doesn't seem like this is the case based on the information we have right now. I was curious about any other significance of the date, March 5th, 1993, and found something rather peculiar that may hint to what the new Bendy game will cover. Just 2 days earlier in the history of the United States, the Great Depression had reached what many to consider its lowest point. as all banks were ordered by the government to shut down their doors on people trying to do bank runs. This means that anyone who didn't get their money before this date essentially had no money until about a fortnight later. This is when newly elected President FDR introduced legislation that gave banks the ability to reopen and sparked the beginning of a hopeful economic recovery. Given that March 5th, 1933 was another big day at Joey Drew's studios, and this day may have been related to the opening of Bendy Land, the date suggests that Joey was set up for a fortnight of potential failure amidst fear of people losing their money and being physically unable to get it. Now altogether, what does this mean for the new Bendy game? I see all of this as a way to explore the decline of the studio through Susie Campbell's perspective, with the relationship she had with Sammy Lawrence adding tension to the story. But why stop there? Analyzing Joey Drew's tape along with Wally's can help us not only confirm this, but also discover another interesting storyline closer to Henry's heart. In Joey Drew's tape, he states that
dreaming can make it so, and my friends, it has!
Is he referring to dreams being just the expansion of his studio, or dreams referring to bringing the tunes to life? The next game may put an emphasis on learning more about bringing the tunes to life as we learn more about Susie's perspective on the whole situation, a point we discussed for Wally's tape. On a side note, there may be a couple of interesting lines that might just tie in with the main game. Joey mentions,
"Just too many secrets being cooked up in the kitchen."
And lo and behold, at the end of Bendy and the Ink Machine, we can see Joey Drew in the kitchen. So is this a reference to him planning something in his apartment, or connecting the studio to it? This may have been the start of his plans to create an infinite prison for an unsuspecting worker, in this case, Henry, who would have left around this point. Then Joey mentions that big things are coming. Massive things. My thoughts are that he is talking about bringing the tunes to life to showcase at Bendyland, which would also agree with what we mentioned in Wally's tape. There's also talk about knocking out a few walls and putting in a few desks. This is interesting because it marks the time around when Henry left the studio, and possibly the beginning of the creation of the Ink Machine. When Henry returned to the studio at the beginning of Bendy and the Ink Machine, he says,
"Looks like they knocked out a wall or two after I left. Guess it took a few people to replace me."
From this, we can safely say that Henry left the studio sometime around or before February 10th, 1931, the time when Joey Drew also said the same thing in this teaser tape. Just a reminder that the new Bendy game is not a sequel, prequel, or Bendy 2, so we may be going through the game in the perspective of a character other than Henry. Some of these include Bendy himself, a lost one, Alice Angel, as we've mentioned before, or perhaps even Allison Angel, as she has a whole backstory that was hinted at in Chapter 5. Remember how she would explore the other levels of the studio and map them out? This plotline could also give life to the story of how Allison Angel met Tom, which we only get a sneak peek at through her dialogue and her graffiti in Chapter 5. Another interesting protagonist choice would be Linda, so perhaps this adventure may be in her perspective as she looks for Henry. Only thing is, how does she get involved exactly? Does Joey Drew also reach out to her by letter too? He did seem pretty envious that Henry left the studio to start a family, so perhaps he tries to woo Linda when Henry is out of the picture. However, we don't really have a grasp on when Henry gets trapped in the studio. Judging from the release date of the most recent Bendy tune, Tasty Trio Troubles, which was in 1935, with this tape being recorded in 1931, that means that Linda and Henry would have been in a relationship for 4 to 5 years at the least. And if they really started a family, then Linda would have loved Henry too much and would have seen through Joey's evil plans. On a twisted note, Joey Drew could easily have kidnapped their potential child and threatened to hurt them if Linda didn't go along with his scheme, hence the child at the end of Chapter 5. Joey saying that he is bringing dreams to life could also hint at an exploration of Susie's story and the birth of Bendy, since her dream was essentially fulfilled when she became the voice of Toon Alice, but was also swiftly taken away when she was replaced by Alison Pendle. Back to Joey's tape, let's quickly touch on him saying, "Nothing is too good for my studio family." I covered this in my previous video, but it's a nice reminder of how much of a scumbag Joey really is, since we know for a fact that he scripts himself to sound good and realistically couldn't invest properly in the studio expansion, making for a rather horrendous workplace for his studio family. The Twitter prodigies also shared some interesting views on the tapes. Some of the prodigies were talking about how Alice Angel called Sammy a good liar. This is an interesting point because it may be a testament to her bitterness towards him for their breakup. The question on my mind is what was really going on in Sammy's mind. Other prodigies also agreed that there may be a love connection between Sammy and Susie, with some even suggesting something going on between Wally and Susie, though I think that might be unrequited. Nevertheless, it's a really good point and it might just hint towards Susie using Wally at some point, since in the Chapter 4 Haunted House ride, she mentions that at Joey Drew's studio, you either exist in someone else's pocket or someone else is in yours. This means that there was a culture of the workers using each other at all levels of the studio, further lending to Wally possibly becoming Susie's pawn after realizing that she was Sammy and Joey Drew's all along. There was also an interesting perspective shared by a Discord prodigy, who mentions that the young child who asks for another story from Joey may be the one who we play as or be otherwise involved in the new game. I love this idea because it would add some interesting context to the game. Instead of being an older adult, you would be a younger child exploring the wonders of a cartoon studio they only heard epic stories about. The horror theme would really creep in among the sleep style, as the child would be shorter, thus making all the enemies and obstacles around them larger. We could also expect a greater number of puzzles involving crawling in tight spaces, such as vents. However, this would make for a strange plotline and progression through the story, given all the stuff we've already discussed in this video. And the analysis doesn't stop there. If you want more analysis on Joey Drew's tape, check out this video, or tap one of these videos which were picked just for you. And by the way, you can now buy a cool new Prod Cookie shirt. Pick one up and have fun as we theorize more about the new Bendy Game. Prodigies, I hope that these videos help to expand on how you think. See ya!